Welcome to Off the Fingertips. I am the protege, Jason Gillum Alexander. Welcome, folks. It's really exciting to be here. We have a special show for you today in honor of the biggest holiday of the year. That's right, I said it. The biggest holiday of the year, this Sunday, Mother's Day. A special Mother's Day edition show here on Off the Fingertips with the protege. I want to profile today's guest. Her son is the number 2 ranked high school basketball player in the nation, Mr. Cole Anthony. Mom, Crystal McCrary McGuire. Wonderful lady, an award-winning film, television producer, director, author, mogulette. She's also an attorney. Graduated from the University of Michigan in 1991 with a degree in English and graduated with her JD in law from NYU in 1995. She is a fabulous role model for young women, for moguls, and did a wonderful transformation in terms of shifting her career from law into entertainment. We're going to talk to her today about some of the trials and tribulations of managing high-profile student athletes as it relates to academics and athletics. What am I really looking to tease out of this conversation today? It's really about literacy rates among students who are in elementary and middle schools opposed to the rate of involvement, should I say, in travel basketball or sports. What is the ratio of academics to sport that really comprises or helps to develop a successful student athlete? And that'll be the second part of our discussion today. Student athlete. Is that term adequate? I believe it's inadequate. Just because I was a student and got A's and B's, and just because I made it to the University of Rhode Island and subsequently Stetson University, it never guaranteed me a professional opportunity. So the old adage of do your schoolwork to have something to fall back on is actually incomplete. And I have tons of friends, colleagues, competitors that once they graduated high school really were not able to really transition well into the workforce. And a lot of that, in large in part, is in the way that student athlete developed. What was instilled during those 12 years of education and those 4 years of secondary education. So we're going to get Crystal McCrary McGuire on the line to really help figure out what is the correct model for today's student athlete professional. That said, let me tell you a little bit more about Miss McCrary. She began her career practicing entertainment law with the New York City firm of Paul Weiss before leaving to pursue a full-time career in writing, directing, and producing. Since, she has written for several magazines, published 2 New York Times best-selling novels, and produced original programming for TV and film, including Home Court Advantage, which was in partnership with Patrick Ewing, the NBA great's wife, in 1998. She also went on to produce Gotham Diaries and Inspiration, profiles of Black women changing our world, and she partnered with the famed Spike Lee's wife, Tanya Lewis Lee. Crystal is also co-creator, executive producer for the NAACP Image Award nominating BET documentary series, Leading Women and Leading Men. And last but not least, something that has gained her quality recognition in the marketplace is her production of Little Ballers, which aired on Nickelodeon Sports. She talked about the premise of Nickelodeon Sports and Little Ballers and what was the purpose of that film. She pointed out it was for young ball players who are aspiring to live out their dreams. And she also noted that it was about the family relationships that developed among teammates. And ironically, her son, Cole Anthony, the current Oak Hill Academy All-American who's headed to the University of North Carolina in the fall, is actually the star of the production. So let's get Crystal on the line so we can get her opinions about what student athlete professionals need to do to really be successful in today's marketplace. Last, one key piece of information about Crystal. Her dad was a volunteer for the armed services. He's also a graduate of Wayne State University and an employee of the Ford Motor Company. And when we talk about some of the ways for students to really be proficient academically, okay, what is it that students, athletes must do to really be proficient in reading? Okay, as we looked at a website called dosomething.org, right? 2/3 of students who cannot read proficiently by the end of the 4th grade will end up in jail or welfare. 7% of American incarcerated inmates cannot read above 4th grade. Students who don't read proficiently by 3rd grade are four times more likely to drop out of school. 85% of juveniles who face trial in juvenile court system are functionally illiterate. Only 53% of 4th graders admittingly read every day. This is the information, folks. It's really being determined that by 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, if you're not on reading level, you're probably going to drop out of high school or end up incarcerated. It is a chilling, horrifying connection that the data really supports. I've also done some other research on firstreaders.org. Professional families, people that I would say make over six-figure income, if their child will hear 215,000 words per week, or working class family, 40, probably to 60, 70, $80,000 a year coming into the household, that child will hear 125,000 words per week. And a welfare, low income, Title IX family, that child is only going to hear 62,000 words per week. What does that mean? It means that academic successes at the age of 9 and 10 can be attributed greatly to the amount of talk they hear from birth to 3 years old. The most successful way to improve reading achievement is to increase the access to printed reading materials for young people inside their homes or wherever they're spending the bulk of their time. Children's books, for instance, contain 50% more rare words than prime-time television. Middle-income households, middle income, which is what most of America is comprised of, contain 50% more rare words than primetime television, and the ratio of books to children is 13-1. 13-1 in middle-income households, the ratio of books to children is 13-1. Conversely, for low-income children, low income, and prepare yourself, brace yourself, folks, low-income households' ratio of books to child is 1 book to every 300 children. It's just an alarming fact that our minority student athletes are not reading at home. They're not being read to. They're not on grade level, and they're not reading proficiently. 61% of low-income families, they have no books at all in their households. No books. I mean, that's almost unheard of, no books inside the household for a low-income family. 61%, that's 6 out of 10 families. That's more than half. 80% of preschool and after-school care programs that serve low-income populations have no age-appropriate books. That's grades K through 5 primarily, who go to after-school programs, do not have age-appropriate books. I mean, what are they really doing? Once they do homework, they need to read. Everything cannot be play. I understand health is paramount in providing kids with the foundation and building blocks of health and wellness through regular exercise. However, Reading is fundamental and is the building block of learning. It is the most critical piece for young people to ascertain so they can learn. Furthermore, half of children from low-income communities start first grade up to 2 years behind their peers. That means when they come into school, they're already 2 years behind. Another telling fact, before entering kindergarten, cognitive scores for low-income children are likely to average 60% less than the highest socioeconomic group. I mean, you talk about starting off the race in a hole. This is the preeminent information that no one really talks about in our communities. And the problem is that we're all in this athletic, how should I coin it? Lottery. Too many minority families are more concerned with their children being the next Barry Bonds, the next Michael Jordan, the next Barry Sanders, rather than being the next Denzel Washington, Carver Williams. I'm at a loss for words on the type of individuals, the Dr. Martin Luther Kings, the Nathan Hale Williams, the first black heart surgeon. We're not producing enough working class, successful entrepreneurs. Everyone is in the sports lottery, and it is impacting the relationship between the student and the athlete. 90%, there's a 90% probability that a child will remain a poor reader at the end of 4th grade if they're a poor reader at the end of 1st grade. In other words, if you're off to a bad start, it is so hard to dig yourself out of that reading proficiency hole that is impacting the way the student is approaching school as a whole. It's impacting the greater concept of learning in general, as the higher the illiteracy rate, the higher the high school and college dropout rate, and the higher the incarceration rate. These facts and figures are directly proportionate. And here's a stat that I haven't been able to comprehend or wrap my head around since I've come across it. 68% of 4th graders in the state of Georgia, 68% of 4th graders in the state of Georgia are not reading proficiently. That's almost 7 out of 10 4th graders. So are you trying to tell me that 68% of that group are going to drop out of college, are going to be incarcerated, or going to become juvenile delinquents? These are the things that we're concerned with, and as a result, parents seem to be overlooking this concept and this data in favor of signing their kids up for every AAU basketball program, every trainer. And as a result, there's a disproportionate amount of time that student athletes are dedicating towards reading. Kids are paying anywhere from $25 to $150, $200 per training session. These sessions should be allocated towards private tutors, towards library time, towards home reading stations where they're required to read for 90 minutes at a time with no interruptions. So what does that mean? When I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, there was no television, no radio, no Walkman, no Sony disc player while I did my homework. The belief was that you need to be fully engaged with your academic work to comprehend it, not watered down as you dance and listen to Run DMC. As a result, I was able to be skipped a grade in middle school, and I was able to attend the famed Archbishop Malloy High School in New York City because I was able to pass the entrance exam and I could do the work. I maintained a B average there. So I'm really disappointed at the decisions that modern day parents are making in terms of allocating the proper resources and time for their children to read instead of sending these kids to practice, training sessions to the park. And this is something that we're going to talk to our guest, Crystal McCrary McGuire, today and find out exactly what did she do with Cole Anthony, who also went to Malloy. What did she do to him that allows him to be a great student? And how often did he go away for AAU basketball trips? How much time did he practice on his game? What is the ratio of student to athlete in his development? And what provisions, what pieces of development did she insert in this student athlete tenure that is going to prepare him for a professional life that has nothing to do with a ball bouncing? So let's get Crystal on the line. Are we ready for Crystal? Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Hey, Crystal, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. I'm glad that you said it's the most important holiday of the year. I agree.
It really is. And Crystal, tell us a little bit about your childhood. I know your dad was a Wayne State University graduate, and that has to have impacted you and your family growing up in that household. Speak to that.
Well, actually, it was my mom who graduated from Wayne State University, and even more importantly in our household was she was a school teacher, an elementary school teacher in Detroit, Michigan, where I grew up, and she went on to be a principal.
Yes.
So education was always front and center in our household.
What
And
was the
we
type of
always knew we
what,
always knew that our schoolwork had to be completed before we did anything else.
excellent. Talk about the regiment that your mom, the school teacher, had you on for most of your time as a student.
Well, first of all, as you articulated earlier, we didn't grow up in a household where there were, electrics. I mean, I grew up pre-cell phone, pre-internet. Uh, Books were our nightly routine, with the exception of maybe being able to, when it was four television channels pretty much. It was like ABC, NBC, CBS, and I don't even think Fox was around when I grew up. Maybe a local channel. Um, and
Don't date
it
yourself,
was
Crystal.
right. I think I really dated myself when you said what year I graduated from the University of Michigan. You dated me. You outed me. So I might as well just keep it going with the artifacts that I grew up with. But anyway, so yeah, in our household, reading was just a big part of our lives. It was our daily routine, our nightly routine, um, nightly dinners.
A nightly
Going out to
routine.
dinner.
That is
Yes,
impressive.
yeah. I mean, that's very much how we grew up. And I mean, I even actually look back and think, how differently um, I grew up to even, how Cole grew up. It was not the same focus um, when I grew up, quite frankly, on kids and kids' extracurricular activities and, organized sports when I grew up was not the business that it is today. It was
Yes.
also not as all consuming as it is today. And it didn't start as young as the kids are playing, AAU basketball. These days, they're playing it as young as second, third grade, maybe even younger. So it was just a very different lifestyle, and it was a different focus and emphasis on sports. I mean, we're in a whole different era now where there is this hyper focus
Yes.
on a large part of the population, and children are being brought up in households where the families are being inundated with options for their kids to play sports, and not just basketball. It's soccer, it's baseball, it's football, it's just across the board. There's so many more options and so many more choices, and in part because it's become more of a business. It's a
Yes.
money making venture in many respects. And just for instance, we live in New York City. Just in the New York City tri-state area, there, as of 5 years ago. I have to actually get the most recent statistics. I'm sure it's larger, but there are over 900 registered AAU basketball teams just in the New York City tri-state area. I know that that's larger than the national average, but that is telling there, just the focus that there is, and just in basketball.
Sure.
So
Cole has
yeah.
really amassed a wonderful amateur career. Really quick, talk about your approach to his development as a student athlete. What is the ratio of school time, hours allocated versus trips? And the second part of that question is, have you implemented any professional points in his career in the event that he decides or chooses not to become a professional basketball player? What is the game plan?
Well, to answer the first part of your question regarding, what we implemented for Cole, he let us know probably around 6th or 7th grade that it was basketball that he really wanted to focus on.
Yes.
And once again, it's kind of sad. You look at kids today, they don't play it's not the 4 sports that they did when you and I grew up, or maybe
Yes.
just when I grew up. I might be older than you, but he, there was a period where he was playing soccer, he was playing baseball, he was playing football and basketball, and he really had to make a choice because AAU basketball, as you know, it's essentially a 10-month-year commitment.
Yes.
Not the AAU, but just basketball. So it's AAU for 3-4 months, and then your high school team, and then there are all these other extra games, all-star game here, or 3-on-3 here. So it really becomes a commitment all year round. So as he progressed and he got more serious with basketball and started traveling with various AAU teams, we always knew the organization and knew the coach pretty well and traveled with him for many years. And we were there making sure he got his schoolwork done on the road. Oftentimes there were study halls with his teams. I mean, I think a big part of it was the selection process that we made, making sure that he was with the right AAU organization. And we were fortunate enough to be able to be there with him.
Yes.
Where, it's a lot to travel with your kids on these trips. Some parents can't do that. And some organizations that, take these kids on these road trips are not as scrupulous
Yes.
as, you would want them to be or expect them to be when, they have the care of kids under their control.
Sure.
So, but as Cole got older, but let me go back. He had a great foundation, so we were very fortunate that
Yes.
we were able to give him a solid foundation with education and, having books in our household. I mean, as you mentioned, I was involved. I was on the board of a new organization called Jumpstart, which is directly related to early childhood literacy. Early childhood literacy meaning as young as 3 years old, making
Awesome.
sure kids are exposed to what's called the dialogic reading method, where you read along and you sign out to the kids what something, what an image means, and you get their involvement. And it's like a didactic method where you go back and forth with them, even as young as 3, to make sure that they understand what's going on. But I say all that to say that directly correlates to the 3-4-year-old early exposure to reading. Actually
Yes.
correlates to that 3rd grade national reading equivalency exam. And if you don't get this early childhood literacy, even in pre-K, you are at a disadvantage.
Totally.
Your child is at a disadvantage when they get to that 3rd grade national reading equivalency exam, which just, is a domino effect for all the potential pitfalls leading to illiteracy going into high school, and then the dropout rate and the incarceration rate and so on and so forth. And it's disproportionate, as you noted, as it relates to African American.
Absolutely.
kids.
Very systemic process.
Right. So, but in any event, so we were, Cole, let's just, be candid. His parents and step-parents, my husband, Greg's wife, Greg and I are divorced. Cole's father, who, as you know, played in the NBA. we all have our, not only our college degrees. I think Greg has an undergraduate degree, but the rest of us have advanced degrees.
Yes.
And like, for instance, my husband, Ray McGuire, went to Harvard for undergrad, played college basketball at Harvard, but decided to stop playing basketball because he looked at the long-term plan.
The game of life, the one that we all play.
It's the long game. It's not what you might be doing 5, 10 years from now, but where do you want to be 20 years from now? Where do you want to be 30 years from now? And that takes a certain amount of maturity and guidance around you. And so that was, the environment that Cole was being raised in. Again, very blessed to be able to be in that position. But you're right, education should be first and foremost. I mean, parents should be allocating their resources towards tutoring sessions with their kids rather than working out with these expensive trainers. But the big but in all of this, it's complicated. The first thing, though, is there is this seduction of the possibility of these kids going pro in their minds, in their parents' minds. And even for the ones that aren't necessarily thinking their kids are going to go pro, they're thinking, my kid's going to get a athletic scholarship.
Yes.
And their college paid for, which is attractive. I mean, college is incredibly expensive. Most people, don't come out. The vast majority of Americans that do go to college don't come out with a huge debt that they owe for student loans. So it's complicated in that respect because you do have families and kids that get seduced by this dream of playing professional basketball when, in my documentary Little Ballers, there was an agent that was in the film. I don't know if you know Travis, Travis King.
I know the name, not the person.
So he was an AAU coach, one of the good ones. One of his players was Amari Stoudemire. And he, ended up becoming a sports agent, but he's in my documentary, and he has this, sort of broad example, but the breakdown being, you look at there are approximately 10 million high school students playing varsity basketball.
Yes.
There are approximately 2,000 Division I basketball scholarships. There are approximately 60 guys that get drafted into the NBA, 30 that make the team.
Yeah, the numbers are astounding.
10 million, you go from 10 million in high school to 30, and then you get that 30. How many will last after, beyond their rookie contract? And then you just say they do last. How many go bankrupt? It's a staggering statistic of the number of former professional athletes that become bankrupt after they retire from the NBA, or not even say, forced retirement oftentimes. So this should be about the long game.
Absolutely.
And the long game, we don't get to the long game without education.
We call that the MBA before the NBA. I want to thank you for your time this evening, Crystal. It is a pleasure. Much success to Mr. Cole Anthony as he takes his talents to Chapel Hill, one of my favorite universities.
Oh, thank you.
Quickly,
Ours
what will be
too.
your next production? Where can we expect to experience your next production, film, play, novel?
Well, I'm working. I'm working on another. I did the first Little Ballers with Amari. I did another Little Ballers for Nickelodeon with Skylar Diggins. I'm gearing up to film another Little Ballers on Team Durant, Kevin Durant's basketball team. I'm filming a couple other documentaries, one in California, one in Chicago, and so I'm raising 3 kids. My daughter plays basketball too, but also is the president of her class and sings in the chorus. So we try to, keep them physically active, but more than anything, their minds right.
I want to thank you for your time, Crystal. What you said was so relevant to our audience, and I hope that it was a blueprint for parents out there who really don't know the blueprint to raising successful student athletes, to balancing the need for reading, the need for practice, as well as implementing small points of professionalism in the event that professional sports career is not there. And with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Off the Fingertips with the Protege. You guys have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. Take it easy.